Welcome to tonight's Madrasatul Mumtiaz Nahw class, class 72. And the topic today, inshallah, is Al-Mudaf wal-Mudafu ilayhi. Al-Mudaf wal-Mudafu ilayhi, which we translated as the possessor and the possessed pronoun. So that is the meaning of Al-Mudaf wal-Mudafu ilayhi. So, what is al mudaf al mudafu ilayhi? Al mudaf al mudafu ilayhi is not a new topic. We previously treated it in class 3, which is I'm going to post the link here in class 3 Nahwu. So you can see the screen here. I'm sharing the screen of the previous class when we're treating al ma'arif sabun, the seven definite nouns. So that was when we first talked about the class 3. So if you need a revision, maybe you haven't watched this first video, it's important that you start from here. So I'm going to copy the link and put it in the comments so that you can view the previous video first before joining us for this one. So but I'll take us through a very brief revision of the class 3. So we talked about the mudaf Ilay, and we said the mudaf is the first part of a noun when we have a noun construction of al-idafa. So the first part of an idafa construction is the mudaf, while the second word is the mudaf ilayhi, and it is used to show possession. So many times when we want to translate it to English, we say A of B, that is mudaf of mudafu ilayhi. For example, in this example here we have kitabul muallim, and the mudaf is kitab, which means a book, while the mudafu ilayhi is muallim, al muallim. So we say mudaf of mudafu ilayhi, that is kitab of the teacher, the book of the teacher. And we also explained that when a mudaf is attached to an indefinite noun, a nakro, it will remain a nakro. For example, let's say the teacher is not specified, like we have muallimun, which is a nakro, which means a teacher. So when we say kitabu muallimin, a book of a teacher, it remains a nakro because we don't know which teacher they are talking about or which specific book they are talking about. While when we know the teacher, when we say kitabul muallim, we say the book of the teacher, we know the teacher we are talking about. So in that case, it is explained. And we also explained that a mudaf does not take alif and lam in its basic general form. A mudaf cannot have alif and lam. It will remain in its bare state. We are not going to add an alif and lam to the beginning of a mudaf, as we can see in the examples that we have here. Kitabu muallim, qalamu zaidin, maliki yawmiddin. We can see that our mudaf, which is the first part, the first word, does not usually have an alif and lam to show the ma'rifa. Deciding that is ma'rifa or nakra depends on the mudaf really. So that's basically the basics of mudaf and mudaf really. So inshallah today we are now going further to explain the more technical aspects of mudaf and mudaf ilayhi. So we have our amthila, and as usual we are going to start with our qaida. Remember, we always start our Nahwu lessons with our qaida. So what does our qaida says? Our qaida says that al mudafu ismun nusiba ila ismin ba'da, that a mudaf, that is a possessed noun, ismun nusiba ila ismin ba'da, is a word that is connected, that is related to a word that is after it. فتعرف بسبب هذه النسبة أو تخصص, that it now becomes معرفة. تعرف, it becomes معرفة بسبب هذه النسبة, because of this relationship. أو تخصص, or it becomes specified. So something that we don't know before. If I say from the example that we had before, that what kitabun, a book can be any book in the world. But the moment I say kitabu muallim, I now specify that I'm not just talking about any book. I'm talking about what? Kitabu muallim, the book of the teacher. Or when I say Kitabullah, then you know that I'm not talking about any book. I'm talking about what? I'm talking about Allah's book. So that is how a mudaf becomes what? Ma'arraf, or it becomes mukhassas because of its idafa relationship. So that is the first thing that we need to note, and we've explained that in the previous lesson. So now the second qaida says al mudafu yuhdhafu tanwinuhu inda al idafati idha kana munawwanan qablaha. That a mudaf, we are going to erase the tanwin of a mudaf anytime we have an idafa relationship. Idha kana munawwanan qablaha, if it used to be what? If it used to have tanwin. If it used to have tanwin before it became a mudaf, we are going to clean the mudaf. وتحذف نونه إذا كان مثنى أو جمع مذكر سالما. Or and we remove the nun if it is a muthanna or it is a jamu muzakkar salim. We have talked about jamu muzakkar salim earlier. So now before we go on to the last qaida, before okay, let's take the last qaida. Al mudafu ilayhi ismun ya'ti ba'da al mudaf wa huwa majrur. And we are told that the mudafu ilayhi is the word that comes after the mudaf, and it always takes what? Majrur. It is going to take a kasra. It's going to be in a state of jarru. So that is the mudafu ilayhi. But now most of the focus on this lesson will be on this second qaida, because the first and third qaida we have explained them in detail in the earlier video. So now we're talking about al-mudafu yuhdhafu tanwinuhu inda al-idafati idha kana munawwanan qablaha. That a mudaf, we are going to clean its tanwin anytime it enters into an idafa relationship, if it used to have tanwin before. So and that is so let's go up here and look at the it. So we have what? لعبنا في فناء المدرسة. لعبنا في فناء المدرسة. We played in the compound of the yard of the madrasa. We played in the yard of the school, or in the compound of the school. So we can see that our mudaf is what? Our mudaf is fina'i. Our mudaf is what? Fina'i. And you can see it does not have alif and lam like we said before. That, and it does not also have what? It does not have tanwin. We say fina'il madrasa. So let's look at how it happens. We have fina'un, because we know that naturally a word in its natural state, a compound. Fina'un, a compound. It has kasra here because of fi, which is an harf jarri. That's why we have fina'in. So standing on its own is going to be fina'in, a compound or a yard. So that is why it has tanwin. So but because of idafa, we now do an idafa relationship with madrasa, showing that that compound belongs to the madrasa. The compound is owned by the madrasa. So when we enter here, it now becomes fina il madrasa. So there is not going to be any tanwin on that fina anymore. It now becomes what? Fina il madrasa. La'ibna fi fina il madrasa. We played in the compound of the madrasa, or we played in the madrasa's compound. So we can also see that the first principle, we said that most of the time when we are translating idafa, we are going to use an off to show the relationship between the mudaf and mudaf ilayh. So la'ibna fi fina ila madrasa. So let's look at the second example too. We also have what? Ibta'id an qarini su'i. Distance yourself, go far away from a qarini su'i, a bad friend, or a friend of evil. So that is the literal translation. We say what? A friend of evil. So ibta'id an qarini su'i. So normally it would have just been qarinin, but because of idafa that has happened, we remove the tanwin. So it now becomes mu'arraf qarini su'i. the friend of what? Evil. So not just any friend, we have specified the friend by saying that it is a friend of evil. So the next one, Mashaitu ala shati in Nil. I walked on the shore or on the bank of what? Of Nil, of River Nile. So shati in, it would have just been in its natural form, it is Munawwana. But because of the Idofa relationship, we now remove the tenwin. So, and finally we have Rakibtu Kitoro Sobahi. Rakibtu Kitoro Sobahi. I climbed or I boarded the what? The morning train, or what? The train of the morning. So when we say so Kitoron, if I just said a train, I boarded a train. Kitoron. Rakibtu Kitoron. I boarded a train. But now that I want to specify it with Idofa, I now say it is the train of the morning. So it now becomes what? Kitoro Sobahi. So because of the Idofa relationship, we remove the tenwin and it becomes Kitoro Sobahi. So you notice that our Mudaf, it neither has an alif and lam, neither does it have what? A tenwin. And that is the very important point. So now let's go to the Muthanna. What if we have two things and want to use those two things as a Mudaf? For example, I have two hands and I want to relate those two hands to something. So for example, if you look at the second example here in this second set, we have Gosaltu Yadayi Tifli. Gosaltu Yadayi Tifli. I washed the two hands of this child. What happened there? We remember that when we were talking about our Muthanna, we said Muthanna is usually denoted by an alif and noon. Yadun, one hand, yadani, two hands. So, but because of now, it is now in a state of nasbu, gosal to yadai. It is the maf'ulun bi in this case. So it now becomes yadaini. So if we look at this my breakdown here, we have yadaini, gosaltu yadaini. I washed two hands, just two hands. Which two hands? So our mudaf now comes to specify it for us, that our mudaf really comes to specify it for us that those two hands belonged to the child. So what do we say? We now say yadai tifli. So and that is what we have in our core here. One, we remove the ten when it becomes a mudaf. But we now said watuhdhafu nunu idha kana muthanna, that we are going to remove the noon if that our mudaf is what? Is muthanna. So in this case we have yadaini, and now because of idofa we remove that noon, it now becomes yadai tifli, the two hands of the child. So you will never hear yadaini tifli. There is nothing like yadaini tifli because of idofa. Once idofa enters, we have to remove that noon. So it now becomes yadayi tifli. Yadayi tifli. So that is how idofa works in that case. So if we look at our other examples, that is the same thing that happened. Aglaqtu misra'il bab. Aglaqtu misra'il bab. Al misra', it means like one part of a door. You know, if you have a double door, so one part of it is called what? Misra'un. So misra'il bab, one part of the door. Aglaqtu misra'il bab. I closed the two. So misra'aini. So because of the idofa relationship, that noon is removed and it becomes misra'il bab. So those are in the cases of jaru or nasbu, where we have aini. But if it is in a normal raf'un state, for example, lama'at ayna al-kitti. Lama'at ayna al-kitti. So aynun is what? One eye. Aynani is two eyes. So aynani is our fa'il in this case. Lama'at, the two eyes shown. The two eyes what? They shown. So lama'at aynani ayna al-kitti, the two eyes of the cat shown. You know, when cats at night, you see that their eyes are always shining bright. So lama'at ayna al-kitti, the two eyes of the cat shown. So what happened here? Aynani, in its raf'un state, we use alif and nun to denote mathanna. So we have ainani, ainani, and when we now add al-kitti to it, when we nusiba it to the when we relate it to a mudaf ilayhi, which is kitti, so it now becomes aina al-kitti, the two eyes of the cat shown. So finally we are going on to the last part, which is when we in our second qaida. In our second qaida we said the mudaf will remove the tanween, or if it is muthanna we remove the noon, aw jam'a mudhakkari mudhakkarin saliman, or if it is a jamu mudhakkar salim. Remember that jamu mudhakkar salim is formed by adding a waw and noon to the noun in its raf'un state, or when it is in jaru or nasbu state, that waw becomes a ya. So and that is why we have muhsinin. So wabil akhir we have muhsinin. So muhsinin, that is what the pious people. Shkuru suhufu muhsinil umma, that the books, they thank the pages of the books, they thank, they give thanks, they appreciate the muhsinin, the pious people. So muhsinil umma. So what happened here in muhsinil umma? We are relating the muhsinin, that not just any pious people, the pious people of the ummah. So and because of the idafa relationship, like we said in the mudaf, we are going to remove the noon in jamu mudhakkar salim, so it becomes muhsinil umma. So muhsinin plus al umma, it becomes what? Muhsinil umma, the pious people of the ummah. So that's what happens in the idafa relationship. And finally, in its rough on state, we have muallimuna. Muallim, one teacher. Muallimuna, the teachers. So when we now want to say the teachers of the madrasa, so what do we have in the example here? They said jaa muallimul madrasa, the teachers of the madrasa have come. So muallimuna, the teachers is what is our mudaf, while al madrasati is our mudaf ilayhi. So when idafa relationship comes, this muallimuna will lose his noon in order to be able to participate in the idafa. So it becomes muallimul madrasa, the teachers of the madrasa. On mudafu wa mudafu ilayhi. So a brief recap: we said a mudaf is ismun nusiba ila ismin ba'dahu, a word that is what? A noun, ism that we connect to an ism that is coming after it, and because of that connection between those two, that ismu that was supposed to be nakro ta'arrafa bisababi hadhihi nisba, it becomes a ma'rifa because of that relationship. Aw takhassasa, or it becomes specified. And we said that whenever that happens, whenever that mudaf becomes joined to a mudaf ilayhi, it is going to lose its tenwin if it was one before, if it was a word that had tenwin before, or if it was a jamo, if it was a muthanna or a jamu mudhakkar salim, it is going to lose the noon that is at the end. So and finally we now said the word that comes after the mudaf is called a mudaf ilayhi, and it is always majrur. So and that brings us la ilaha illa ant wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.